So imagine a paramedic arriving at a house in the middle of the night.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, and the dispatch note on the dashboard literally just says, unresponsive teenager.
Oh, wow. That is um, incredibly vague.
Right. That's it. That's all they know. So they walk through the front door and step into just absolute chaos.
Like panic everywhere.
Exactly. Parents are screaming. The living room is a total mess. The environment is just completely unstable. And, the paramedic has zero medical history on this patient.
Not at all.
So what is their very first move? Because, surprisingly, it's not to just immediately start some medical procedure on the teenager.
Which is what everyone assumes, right?
But it's not. Their first move is to actually secure the room. It's to establish this, perimeter of calm so that the actual work can even begin.
It completely flips the traditional hierarchy of care, if you think about it.
Oh, so?
Well, the assumption is always that the physical intervention is the most important thing. Like, treat the injury right away.
Right. Get straight to the medicine.
Exactly. But in an emergency, the ability to architect the environment and, regulate all that panic around you, that's actually the prerequisite for any medical procedure succeeding.
And that dynamic is basically the entire foundation of our deep dive today.
Yes, it's a really fascinating one.
We are looking at a document titled, What a DSL Can Learn From a Paramedic. Now, just to clarify for everyone listening, a DSL is a designated safeguarding lead.
Right. That's the person in an educational setting, like a school or maybe a boarding program, who holds the legal and professional responsibility for child protection.
Exactly. But I want to be clear, whether you work in education or maybe you manage a corporate team or you just find yourself dealing with, highly volatile emotional situations in your own life, this deep dive is a masterclass in decision-making.
Oh, absolutely. It really applies anywhere.
We're basically opening an emergency first aid kit. But instead of, bandages and splints, it's filled with communication frameworks and emotional triage tools.
I love that analogy.
Thanks. We're exploring how the critical crisis management skills of a medical first responder can completely reframe how we handle emotional emergencies.
Because the starting conditions are almost always identical.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like that paramedic walking into the chaotic house. When a safeguarding professional is first confronted with a crisis, they almost never have the full story.
They're flying blind.
Completely. A student might just drop a fragmented sentence at the end of a class, or maybe a colleague reports a vague family disturbance.
Right, so the information is vastly incomplete.
Exactly. The information is incomplete, the emotional temperature in the room is super high, and time just feels critical.
Which means we have to fundamentally shift our understanding of what our primary goal actually is in those first few minutes.
We really do. We are so conditioned to want to fix problems the exact second they appear.
We want to be the hero who solves it.
Yes. But the core realization here is that the first responder's job is not to solve the issue. It is simply to stabilize it.
And the source material calls this the paramedic principle, right?
It does, yeah. The paramedic principle argues that your early response affects the ultimate outcome significantly, even before you have a full diagnosis.
So even before the paramedic knows exactly what's failing in a patient's cardiovascular system, they're taking action.
Right. They are securing the airway, they are checking a pulse, they're just holding stability.
Okay, so if we translate that to a safeguarding environment or just a management environment, the very first response a professional gives to a person in distress shapes absolutely everything that follows.
Everything. It dictates the trust, their feeling of emotional safety, and honestly, their willingness to actually disclose the rest of the information later.
There's this profound professional truth highlighted in the text that really stuck with me. It says a person in distress might remember your first response long after they forget the procedural details of what happened next.
That is so true. They remember how your reaction made them feel.
Right. They don't remember the forms you filled out. They remember if you panicked or if you were calm. It reminds me of, tech support triage. If your laptop is smoking, the IT guy doesn't try to rebuild the motherboard right away. He just unplugs it so the battery doesn't catch on fire.
That is a perfect way to put it. Stop the fire first.
But I do have to push back a little bit here.
Sure, go ahead.
If we are shifting our entire mindset from solving to just stabilizing, if someone comes to you in genuine distress, say a student discloses a really terrifying situation at home, and you only focus on containment, aren't you just kicking the can down the road?
I get why you'd ask that.
I mean, doesn't that person desperately need a solution right in that exact moment?
It is entirely natural to feel that urgency, especially when, empathy is driving you to want to alleviate their pain immediately.
Yeah, you want to help them.
Right. But the framework explains the actual mechanics of crisis response here.
Hmm.
Rushing to a premature solution in that very first encounter actively increases the risk to the individual.
Because you're swinging in the dark.
Precisely. You are acting on fractured data.
Wow. Fractured data. That's a dangerous place to make decisions from.
Very dangerous. If you try to solve a complex safeguarding issue based on a 2-minute conversation, you are highly likely to make promises you absolutely cannot keep.
Oh, like saying, don't worry, I won't tell anyone.
Yes.
Wait.
Which, legally, you might be obligated to violate an hour later.
Oof, yeah. That destroys trust instantly.
Or, even worse, taking premature action might accidentally alert a dangerous family member before a proper safety plan is even in place.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. That's terrifying.
You might even inadvertently shut down the conversation just by jumping to conclusions, which causes the person to withhold the most critical piece of the puzzle.
So stabilization isn't delaying the work. Stabilization is the work.
Yes, beautifully put. You are building a secure structure around this emerging crisis so that wider, more specialized systems can safely engage when the time is actually right.
You're just preventing further deterioration.
Exactly. Not every situation can be resolved in a single conversation, but every situation can be stabilized.
Okay, but this is a big... But if you're prioritizing stability over an immediate solution, how do you actually know what stabilizing actions to take when you are flying completely blind?
That's the real challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. Like you're sitting in an office, someone drops a horrifying, fragmented disclosure right in your lap, and you have no idea what the full picture is. What do?
This is where the concept of dynamic risk assessment comes in.
Dynamic risk assessment. Tell me about that.
Well, operating under extreme uncertainty is basically the baseline for both paramedics and safeguarding leads. You are always dealing with partial disclosures, conflicting accounts, rapidly evolving conditions.
The fog of war, basically.
Exactly. And the natural human instinct in that fog is to freeze, to wait until you have all the facts before making a move.
Which seems logical. You don't want to make a mistake.
It seems logical, but the text points out that waiting for perfect certainty actually allows the danger to compound.
It's like navigating a ship through heavy fog. You can't just drop anchor and wait for the weather to clear because the currents might drift you into rocks.
Right, you can't just stop.
You have to keep moving forward using whatever radar you have, making these small, calculated adjustments.
That is the absolute essence of dynamic risk assessment. You make a judgment and you take a stabilizing action based on the incomplete data currently available to you.
Okay.
And then, crucially, you constantly reassess as new information emerges. You ask an open question, you observe their response, and then you adjust your assessment.
But to do that effectively, you need a very specific tool to cut through that fog. And the document says it isn't a checklist or a protocol manual.
No, it's not paperwork.
It is emotional regulation. This actually stood out to me as one of the most vital insights we're covering today.
Oh, without a doubt. The emotional regulation of the leader influences the entire environment.
There's a line in the document that says people in distress often, quote, borrow emotional regulation from calm adults.
Borrowed calm. It's brilliant. And it is a biological mechanism, not just some psychological trick.
Wait, biological, how does that work?
Well, when someone is in crisis, their nervous system is heavily dysregulated. Their amygdala is just firing constantly, putting them in this intense fight, flight, or freeze state.
Right, they're in pure survival mode.
Exactly. They are entirely incapable of rationalizing their own safety in that moment.
So they can't calm themselves down?
No, they can't. But by presenting a deeply regulated, calm presence, you are actually offering their nervous system a different frequency to sync up with.
Oh, wow. It's exactly like being a passenger on a turbulent flight.
Oh, I like this. Go on.
Like when the plane suddenly drops 1,000 feet, you don't look out the window to gauge how dangerous the situation is, right?
Yeah.
You have zero frame of reference for aerodynamics.
True. I have no idea what the wings are supposed to be doing.
Exactly. You look straight at the flight attendants. If they're walking down the aisle, calmly checking seatbelts and just chatting with each other, your brain immediately registers, okay, we are safe.
Because they aren't panicking.
Right. But if they are strapped into their jump seats looking terrified, you panic. You borrow their regulation to determine your own reality.
That is a perfect example of borrowed calm.
But here is the practical challenge, and I really want to get your take on this. It is incredibly easy for us to sit here and say, just stay calm.
Easier said than done, for sure.
How does a safeguarding lead actually project that? when internally their own heart rate is spiking because of the severe disclosure they literally just heard.
Yeah, that gap between internal panic and external calm, that is where professional competence is forged.
So what are the practical steps?
The framework details very specific physiological applications for projecting this calm, and it starts with your voice.
The voice.
Yes, even if your adrenaline is surging, deliberately bringing the volume and the tempo of your voice down is the very first step. You have to actively slow your cadence.
Almost speaking slower than feels natural.
Exactly. Because this signals to the distressed person's nervous system that there is no immediate physical threat in the room.
So you are actively manipulating the environment through your own biology.
Yes, you are. And beyond tone, it's also about the structure of your communication.
Like the words you use.
Right. When people are panicked, they just cannot process complex, multi-layered information. You have to use very short, predictable sentences.
Like, sit here, breathe. I am listening.
Exactly. Keep it simple. Also, you ensure that any physical movement in the room is telegraphed and deliberate, no sudden movements.
You don't just suddenly reach for your phone.
Right. You'd say, I'm going to reach for my phone now to check the time.
Got it.
And perhaps most importantly, any escalation you initiate, whether that's making a phone call or bringing another colleague into the room, it has to be done with measured intention, not frantic urgency.
So no running down the hallway screaming for help.
Exactly. This deliberate pacing reassures the student, but it also anchors any other staff members watching. You basically become the structural integrity for the entire room's emotional state.
Okay, so you've navigated that initial shock. You've used your dynamic risk assessment to make safe choices. You've offered that borrowed calm. And you stabilized the person sitting in front of you.
You've secured the perimeter.
Yes. But eventually, you have to pass the baton. You can't just hold them in that stabilized bubble forever in your office.
No, you can't.
And according to the source material, this transition point is where some of the most dangerous systemic failures actually occur.
Yes, we are moving into the art of the handover. And it truly is an art form.
It's that critical.
This source makes a really compelling argument that executing a clean handover is a crucial safeguarding skill in its own right. It's not just some administrative afterthought.
Well, because if we look back at our paramedic analogy, if they stabilize a patient beautifully in the back of the ambulance, but then give a totally chaotic, inaccurate report to the trauma surgeon at the hospital doors.
That patient's risk level spikes all over again.
Exactly. The initial great work is undone.
Right. A poor handover distorts the receiving team's understanding, it delays crucial interventions, and it can introduce deadly biases. Paramedics are rigorously trained to communicate in a way that is chronological, relentlessly precise, and totally stripped of ambiguity.
And applying this to safeguarding requires a really strict boundary between fact and interpretation.
It does.
Important details are just so easily swallowed up if the communication is vague or if it's wrapped in a ton of high emotion. But I want to challenge this rule for a second.
Let's hear it.
Because it feels a little bit counterintuitive to human nature. Like if I'm the professional sitting in the room with a distressed student, I am picking up on 1,000 different cues, right?
Of course. Body language, eye contact.
Exactly. The tone, the hesitation, the vibe of the room. Doesn't the next professional in the chain of care need to know my interpretation of those unspoken contexts?
It's a fair question.
Aren't I basically robbing them of valuable insight if I only give them sterile facts?
Yeah.
Like playing a high-stakes game of telephone where the context gets lost.
It is a very human instinct to want to package the narrative for the next person. You want to be helpful. You want to set the scene.
Right. I want to say, hey, this kid is really shaken up.
But the framework is super clear on why blending raw facts with your subjective interpretation during a formal handover is actually really dangerous. It severely distorts the subsequent professional response.
Okay, walk me through how that distortion happens in practice.
Sure. Let's imagine a scenario where a student discloses a conflict with a parent. If your handover notes say, the student is acting very dramatically about a normal teenage argument.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's loaded.
Right. You have just handed over an interpretation. You have immediately biased the next professional, maybe a counselor or a social worker, before they have even met the student.
Because now they're going in thinking, oh, this is just teen drama.
Exactly. They might subconsciously dismiss the absolute severity of the claim just based on your framing.
You've basically tainted the jury pool?
That's a great way to put it. You've tainted the jury pool. But let's look at the alternative. If your handover says, The student stated their parent threw a glass against the kitchen wall at 8 p.m. The student was crying and physically trembling when reporting this.
That feels completely different.
Because it is. Those are chronological facts and observable behaviors. You aren't leaving out the emotion, you're just documenting the physical reality of the emotion without deciding what it means.
Ah, I see. You're passing along the raw data so the next expert can verify the situation themselves.
Accurate chronology and precise referrals ensure continuity of care without injecting your own bias.
Okay, but wait. If the student is dysregulated and panicked when they first come to you, they aren't speaking in chronological bullet points.
Definitely not.
They're jumping around, they're repeating things, skipping crucial details. How do you actually extract a clean timeline from someone in that state to put into your pristine handover?
That loops directly back to the borrowed calm we discussed earlier.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because you cannot extract a chronological timeline from a dysregulated nervous system. It's biologically impossible.
Because their brain is in panic mode.
Right. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for sequencing and logic, is effectively offline during a panic state.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
So by projecting that regulated calm, you are literally helping their prefrontal cortex come back online.
Wow.
Once they are stabilized, then you can gently guide them. You can say, take your time, let's go back to what happened right after dinner.
So the quality of your handover is actually entirely dependent on the quality of your emotional regulation in those first 5 minutes.
Exactly. It's all connected.
That system-level thinking is brilliant. It shows that strong safeguarding doesn't just rely on a single heroic individual taking on the weight of the world. Just like a paramedic relies on the hospital infrastructure, a safeguarding lead relies on an entire ecosystem of care.
Yes. And knowing how to engage that ecosystem cleanly is the true hallmark of competence.
But as powerful as this emergency medical mindset is for reshaping how we think about crisis response, we do have to examine where the framework hits its limits, right?
Yes, we absolutely do. The source material explicitly dedicates space to this, warning us against treating students merely as emergency incidents.
Because at the end of the day, a school or a workplace is not a trauma ward. The environments just operate under fundamentally different rules.
Completely different roles.
So what are the critical differences we need to keep in mind so we don't over-apply the paramedic metaphor?
I'd say the most glaring difference is the nature of stabilization itself.
How so?
Well, physical stabilization, like applying a tourniquet or clearing an airway, is generally a mechanical, linear process. But emotional stabilization is infinitely more complex. It's highly dynamic, and it's deeply relational.
Right. You can't just apply pressure to an emotional wound and expect it to stop bleeding on a predictable timeline.
Exactly. And the timeline of care is completely different, too. Think about the physical reality of the paramedic's job. They stabilize the patient, they navigate the stressful drive to the ER, they deliver a precise handover to the doctors, and then they leave.
Right. They clean out the back of the ambulance and drive away to the next call. They will probably never see that patient again in their lives.
But a designated safeguarding lead? They don't get to drive away.
No, they don't. They have to see that exact same student in the hallway the very next morning.
Right. They might see them eating lunch in the cafeteria or just sitting in the back row of a math class.
You are forced to exist in the aftermath of the crisis with the person who actually experienced it.
Which is exactly why the source emphasizes what it calls the leadership layer. A clinical handover system is designed for a really brief intersection of lives, but a pastoral communication system is designed for an ongoing community.
So the DSL's job doesn't end at the hospital doors.
No, because the safeguarding lead remains deeply embedded in the environment, their ultimate responsibility goes far beyond executing a one-off clinical handoff. They are tasked with building a long-term culture of safety.
The document mentions promoting well-being literacy. How does that play into this long-term culture?
So, well-being literacy is about giving both students and staff the shared vocabulary and the conceptual frameworks to actually understand their own emotional states.
Oh, so they can talk about it before it becomes an emergency.
Exactly. Instead of just reacting to crises as they flare up, a community with high well-being literacy can identify dysregulation early. They can articulate what they are feeling before it reaches a boiling point.
The safeguarding lead's job isn't just to be the paramedic waiting for the ambulance to be called. It's to teach the entire community how to maintain a safe environment every single day.
Yes. It's about ensuring that emotional containment is a priority across the board, not just a special tool pulled out during an emergency.
It's basically the difference between treating the symptom and fortifying the entire immune system.
Exactly. The paramedic mindset is invaluable for those critical, chaotic first few minutes. But the long-term work requires a different set of muscles entirely.
Looking at the full arc of what we've unpacked today, it's just so clear that the first moments of an emerging crisis hold this outsized weight.
They really do.
They matter enormously,
Hmm.
not because you're expected to miraculously uncover all the answers right then, but because your initial reaction lays the groundwork for the safety, the trust, and the clarity of every single thing that follows.
We've seen how calmness literally saves the ability to think.
And we've explored how shifting from solving to stabilizing creates the actual runway for real help to arrive. Plus, how an incredibly accurate, fact-based handover protects vulnerable people long after the immediate heat of the crisis has passed.
The source poses a really fascinating system-level question for you to consider. When safeguarding concerns first emerge in your setting, are you responding in ways that create emotional stability and accurate understanding? Or are important details and trust already being lost in your first response?
It forces you to look at the mechanics of your own reactions. When you open your emotional first aid kit, what tools are you actually pulling out?
It's a great question to ask yourself.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Building on the idea that an accurate response protects people far beyond the immediate crisis, consider the invisible legacy of your initial reaction.
Invisible legacy, I love that.
Imagine a person in deep distress sitting across from you. They are terrified, their nervous system is totally overwhelmed, and they are entirely unmoored. If they are able to borrow your emotional regulation in that precise moment, and if your factual, bias-free handover ensures that the broader ecosystem of care supports them correctly tomorrow and the next day, then your single moment of deliberate calm becomes the hidden foundation of their long-term resilience.
And you may never even be credited for the final outcome.
Exactly. They might not even remember your name a decade from now. But what if true leadership in a crisis isn't about being the valiant hero who fixes the problem right then and there? What if true leadership is simply having the discipline to be the structurally sound bridge that gets them safely to the next step,